We begin in India, where a passenger plane crashed into a medical campus just seconds after takeoff. The Air India Boeing 787 was en route from Ahmedabad in western India to London. The airline says 241 people on board were killed, but one man at least has survived the crash.
Surveillance footage captures the moment an Air India passenger plane crashes into a nearby building just moments after takeoff, sending a massive fireball high up into the sky. It's one of India's worst air disasters in decades. The aftermath, a mess of charred metal, smoke, debris and dead bodies. Civilians and rescue teams rushed to the site, trying to extinguish the fires and rescue any survivors. More than 200 people were killed, both passengers and people on the ground. Eyewitnesses described an appalling scene.
We heard a loud noise. It sounded like a bomb blast. Then we got there. There was smoke and fire. I said, let's go and see. Someone said the plane had fallen. We got there and saw the atmosphere was very bad. There were 3 people lying there.
I work as a driver in a warehouse. I couldn't go near the plane. There were dead bodies outside.
Relatives of those on board were asked to give DNA samples to identify the victims. They described the moment they heard the news.
My uncle was on the plane. I learned about the crash around 3 o'clock. And as soon as I got here, we tried to call his phone, but we were unable to connect.
Air India says there were 242 people on board. Only one survived. India's Interior Minister visited him in hospital, along with those injured on the ground. Several investigations into the cause of the crash are underway from Boeing, India, the UK and the US. Air India has set up an emergency support centre for anyone seeking information about their loved ones, and emergency services continued working through the night, searching for bodies and possible survivors.
Christine Negroni is an aviation and travel journalist and author of the books Deadly Departure and The Crash Detectives. She joins us now from St. Barth, France. So the plane crashed seconds after takeoff. Do we know exactly what could have been the cause?
Well, we don't know exactly, but based on the video, which is very illuminating, it does not appear that that airplane was properly configured for takeoff at the time the video was taken. So that doesn't necessarily mean that the airplane took off improperly configured, but by the time it was flying, by the time the airplane was flying into the view of the camera, it does not appear to have been properly configured. It was not in a nose-up attitude. It was going straight on as if it were in cruise flight. And then, of course, you see about 9 seconds into the video, you see the nose coming up slightly, and at that point, it disappears from our view and slams into the building. So that is illuminating as to the why, but it does not tell us exactly, why that happened. It's illuminating as to the what might have happened, but not necessarily the why it happened. And there are a number of reasons for that, including that the pilots did not properly configure, or there was some sort of software problem that caused the airplane to make an uncommanded rollback of the flaps. There's any number of things that could have triggered that, and that is, of course, that's the big investigation process, is trying to find that out.
Well, as you said, there are a lot of open questions at the moment, and we do know that India has, of course, opened a formal investigation, and they will be supported by American and British investigators. Do we know exactly what they'll be looking at?
Oh, sure, of course. And of course, the first thing is after taking a look at the crash scene and looking at the all video that is available and where the wreckage is, but the most illuminating information will come from the flight data recorder. So this piece of equipment, everybody knows them around the world as the black boxes, but these pieces of equipment, the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder, are going to give us information about what was going on in the cockpit, what was being said, what was being heard, if there was a warning horn or some other sort of alarm that the pilots heard. But even more importantly, I think, is the flight data recorder. which records thousands of parameters about what the airplane is doing, everything from engine performance to where the nose was on takeoff, speed, altitude, all of these things. And that will, in my opinion, make this crash less of a mystery than merely a disaster that will soon come to be illuminated as to what happened. I don't think this is an accident that we're going to be wondering about two months from now.
All right. Now, this is, according to the information we found, the first ever fatal crash of a Boeing 787. However, Boeing in recent years has had a lot of problems, including with their 737 MAX model. But so far, the Dreamliner has had a good track record, hasn't it?
No, I don't think that's, I don't think it's had a good track record. You may remember that shortly after the airplane entered service, it was grounded for 4 months because the airplane was carrying a lithium-ion battery, the first airliner to have such a novel technology incorporated in the airplane. And those batteries were going into thermal runaway, which is a very dangerous condition. So all of the airplanes were grounded, and they were grounded for 4 months. So that right away tells you, okay, there was a design problem with the airplane initially. That's problem number one. But problem number two is for the past several years, and the focus of a lot of regulatory attention in the United States has been the assembly plant of the Boeing Dreamliner, which is in South Carolina. And there's all sorts of problems with the assembly plant. The FAA has been keeping its eye on it, as I said, for years. And there are many whistleblowers who have come to the fore to say that safety is being compromised and employees are being threatened to keep quiet about their concerns. One of those whistleblowers committed suicide while in the midst of litigation with Boeing over pressure being put on him. So I would not say that this is an airplane with a stellar safety record, though I have seen that repeated on television. I'd say this is an airplane that from the time it came onto the market was problematic and remains problematic, both for its design issues and its electrical issues and its assembly issues, all of which have been documented.
All right, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. That was aviation journalist Christine Negroni. Thank you very much for sharing your expertise with us.
Thank you.
For more on the investigation, I'm joined by pilot and aviation expert Richard Levy, who's in Dallas, Texas. So, Richard, you have decades of flight experience yourself. When you see that security video, is there anything that we can glean from it?
Yes, it is. Good evening to you all in Berlin. What is a big mystery is the observation that the landing gear is still extended. Immediately after takeoff, once the aircraft is airborne, we retract the landing gear. In this case, they're at an altitude of about 600 feet, and they have the landing gear. They have not retracted the landing gear. That is unusual, number one. Number two, it appears, now the video isn't terribly clear, but it appears the flaps, which extend behind the wing and extend in front of the wing. In essence, it makes a bigger wing out of a smaller wing, which helps the airplane take off at a slower speed, so it uses less runway. Every aircraft has that. Transport category aircraft has that. I don't see the flaps extended there. Now, again, they could be, it's hard to see that. So why was the landing gear out still, and why were the flaps not extended? However, every transport aircraft, Boeing or Airbus, has what we call a configuration warning horn. If the flaps are not set correctly and other items are not set correctly for takeoff, we hear a beeping horn. Is very loud. It's almost irritating, but you reject the takeoff. You do not take off if the flaps are not set. So that is very unlikely that they did not have the flaps set for takeoff, because you have two checklists that confirm that, and then you have this configuration horn. And then the next mystery is there was electrical failure at about 600 feet to a company called Flight Radar 24. The airplane sends signals out to, listing the airline name, the type of airplane, the altitude, and the airspeed. And that equipment, it's called ADS-B, B as in Bravo, stopped sending out electronic signals at about 600 feet. So they had some kind of a system failure.
I see. Something that the investigators will most likely be looking at. Now, this is the first ever fatal crash, rather, of a Boeing 787, but it's not the first time that questions have been raised about the quality of the Dreamliner, despite its clean track record, isn't it?
Yeah, they did have questions. 11. This airplane, I believe, is 11 or 12 years old. And at the very beginning of the manufacturing of the 787, there were battery issues. That's totally fixed. In my opinion, that's not going to be a factor here whatsoever. We're going to look at the pilot actions. And the investigators, as you mentioned in your beginning introductory report, from the US and the UK, from India, from all around the world, they're going to look at immediately what's called black boxes. They're really not black, they're orange. But regardless, the cockpit voice recorder, they're going to hear all the communications between the pilots from the time they left the gate through the takeoff to the crash, or just before, if the electrical power was lost. And then they're going to hear the flight data or read out the flight data recorder, FDR. The flight data recorder on this airplane, the 787, is so sophisticated, it sends out or records data from, I really don't know how many bits of information, thousands maybe, but in the upper hundreds. They will be able to put this puzzle together very fast, in my opinion. The final report will not be out for a year, but the National Transportation Safety Board from the U.S. will probably issue a preliminary report by normal practice in about 30 days. But I don't see any history of what happens, what's going on at Boeing, with the other aircraft, or what's happened over the last year with the Alaska Airlines airplane. I'm seeing this as a separate issue at this point, and it is very early. Full disclosure, we really don't know at this moment.
Now, at the same time, you're saying you haven't seen any issues with Boeing models over the years, but there has been some concerns about Boeing's focus on the financial bottom line over rather some of its engineering. Are those concerns that you would share yourself as well?
Zero. Not a bit, not whatsoever. That is true. It's a business. They want to make money and make profits, and we all know that. But as far as this accident in Ahmedabad, India, I do not see anything to do with the business practices of Boeing aircraft or what's happened in the last year or two with Boeing as a factor in this accident whatsoever. Again, it's early, but we're going to find out. No, I do not see anything about the profits that Boeing wants to make.
Now, could you walk us through for a second some of the investigative processes that would go once we've found the black boxes? What exactly are the investigators going to be looking at that specifically?
Good question. Very good question. Let's start with the cockpit voice recorder. They're going to listen to their cockpit briefings. We actually call it the flight deck nowadays. The briefings at the gate. Who's going to make the takeoff? What would we do if we lose an engine? We always prepare for.
I'm sorry, Richard. Unfortunately, we're going to have to move on to our next story. I apologize. That was aviation expert Richard Levy. Thank you very much for speaking with us.
And for more, I want to bring in now Bhavya Velani. He's an aviation expert and the CEO of Aviation A2Z. That's an online platform for aviation careers and opportunities. Mr. Velani, it's good to have you with us. I know it is still very, very early, but I want to ask you, is there anything about this flight, this plane, that should be considered as the search for a cause of the crash begins?
Yeah, actually, based on the reports, we have seen that there are 2 to 3 possibilities, like the DGCA, the investigation agency, and the Aviation Watchdog of India has revealed that there are potential that there is a suspected bird strike and a complete loss of engine power on both the engines. So it was a twin engine aircraft heading to the London. So yeah, there is a chance of potential bird strike. Also, there are chances of, by looking at the scene, we can see like the there are chances that the flaps have not deployed properly. So there are chances of pilot error, but that's the potential all the investigation agency will be looking at.
What about the fact that it was very, very hot when the plane took off? I understand we were talking about 40 degrees Celsius.
Yeah, but that's the normal temperature because we have seen a temperature rise for around 45 degrees or sometimes reaching 48. So the plane are capable of taking off or landing at such high temperatures. So I don't think that's the cause of a crash, but yeah, investigation agency from US and UK are heading to the site and they are looking into it.
This flight ended just a minute after takeoff. So why is the takeoff of a plane such a crucial moment?
So yeah, there are 80 to 90% of chances all the crashes happen during this landing and takeoff phases. So yeah, it was this crash landed within a 30 seconds. As mentioned, there is one survivor who also shared the details like there was a loud bang noise, all the people were around him. So there was an explosion immediately because that was the collision when plane lose its power. So there are chances of, the first of all the aircraft lost the contact with the ATC. And immediately after that, within a 10 to 12 seconds, it crash landed on a hospital premises.
This is the first ever fatal Boeing 787 crash. Tell us more about this model.
Yeah, so this was the model Boeing developed in 2005, and Air India took delivery of it. It has around 26 aircraft in its fleet, and it is one of the largest 787-8 operator in the world, actually. And there have been maintenance issues with this plane, but what happened with this exact model, the VT A and B, the aircraft involved in this crash, so it will be determined by the investigation agency. But this plane has a great safety record. It's been flying since 15 years, so it's like one of the safest aircraft considered.
There is a global Boeing 787 fleet of about, 1,175 airplanes. Do you expect those planes to be grounded now after this crash?
Yeah, there are potential, but Indian Aviation Minister has said that they will likely to ground the planes flying within Indian fleet. So I think that will be lead to grounding of Air India fleet, but that's the possibility. So it all will depend on the investigation agencies, how they are looking at this. Is it a human error? Is it related to bird strike? Or it is a mechanical failure? So only after they determine there are possibility of mechanical failure, then only they will be able to ground it, because grounding is a big decision and it will affect airlines across the globe, and it will affect thousands, if not millions passengers flying on this aircraft.
Yeah, that is a very good point. Aviation expert Bhavya Velani, we appreciate your time and your insights today, Mr. Velani. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.